So Bruce Jenner was he was talking to Diane Sawyer on ABC, and he came out as this is kind of a big announcement. He came out as a conservative. Well, I also think he also came out as transgender as well. But anyway, what do you think, man? I mean, big announcement from him, and kind of a big deal.
Well, I can't imagine what it feels like to, go through what he's going through on the transgender issue. And, or I guess I should say her, and I wish, I wish Bruce Jenner all the best with that. And yeah, there's just so many levels on how I just can't relate, or I can't imagine, what Bruce Jenner is going through. I certainly can't imagine, what it feels like to be transgendered. I have friends that identify as transgender, and I've always, just been supportive. They've talked to me about it, and I can only imagine what it feels like to feel alien and out of place in your own body. I also can't imagine what it feels like to be an athlete on the level Bruce Jenner was an athlete. I also can't imagine what it feels like to wake up and be like, I'm a Republican. So there's all these levels of how I can only imagine what Bruce Jenner. I think we'd have a hard time finding commonalities if we ever had a conversation.
I don't know. I could probably talk to the guy. Like, I don't have any problem with.
Bruce
Jenner. I mean, like, my wife, a former guilty pleasure of hers, was watching the Kardashians, and so once again, geek flag fly. I always thought about keeping up with the Kardashians. Next generation, joke. Anyway,
wow.
I told you I'm a geek. Anyway, so she'd watch that show, and Bruce always came off as seemed like a decent guy. And for all intents and purposes, he'll make a very decent woman. So, and anyway, I want to make sure that, from now on, I use the pronoun her instead of, him. So when referring to Bruce, I'm going to refer to, her as a woman. Because as he, told Diane Sawyer,
you already
for all intents and purposes, I am a woman, he said. So, but the interesting part about this, and the other thing that I really find it hard to believe, that he is a conservative Republican, and Diane Sawyer asked him, "Are you a Republican, really?" And he said, "Well, yeah. Is that a bad thing?" Well, no, not on its face. I mean, a lot of people are Republicans, and a lot of people who are Republicans are fine people. I have family that are Republicans, and they're excellent people. But when it comes to the relationship between the Republican Party as a whole and what it stands for, and the LGBT community, it seems like there's, there doesn't seem to be much of a place in the party for people like Bruce Jenner. But then again, you have to look at this in another way as well. Bruce Jenner is rich.
Right.
So there is that factor to look at. And when asked about, why exactly he is a conservative Republican, well, he said this. He said, well, I believe in the Constitution. That kind of got to me a little bit. Because it's one of those things where it's like conservative messaging kind of wins out. Because it's like, wait a minute. So that kind of is the assumption that liberals don't believe in the Constitution? Or that the whole idea of believing in the Constitution at all, right? We follow the Constitution. And we respect the Constitution. Right. We don't believe in it. It's not like Tinkerbell. Right.
Yeah, I was just going to say that too. I don't understand the concept of believing in a document. You either accept it and abide by it or you don't. And yeah, that's a pretty weak explanation. And just clear, I've got no problem with Bruce Jenner either. I wish her all the luck in the world.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it is a bit, I guess, confusing when you see groups like even like the Log Cabin Republicans and members of the LGBT community identifying as Republican. And usually it is because on the fiscal end of things, that's where they identify.
But here's the thing, too, about the whole Constitution and about where, Republicans stand on that. I look at their policy positions, and I don't think that conservative Republicans, or at least the party represented by the party, I don't think they believe in the Constitution at all. Mm-hmm. All except excluding the Second Amendment. You have the First Amendment, which they've kind of twisted and perverted to mean that, well, yeah, freedom of religion means that I have the freedom to insert my religion into your life.
Right.
They're not exactly for the Fourth Amendment. Illegal search and seizure? If you're a minority, it's cool. 100% great. Yeah, as evidenced in New York. And you also had, they're not cool on the 14th Amendment. They misinterpret the 10th and only use it for states' rights purposes when states, want to challenge the federal government on something that they don't like, but are okay with other things that they do like. Like, I don't know, for example, proposed federal gay marriage bans, like DOMA.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things that kind of makes that whole assumption that Republicans are the ones who believe in the Constitution and follow the Constitution. It makes it dubious.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And it's just one of those things, even just some of the slogans you constantly hear from that party. It's like, oh yeah,
freedom,
we're the
liberty.
We're freedom, we're the Freedom Party, we're the small government party. Yeah, unless it's referring to imposing our moral will on you, then we're certainly the farthest thing from small government party. So yeah, I mean there's a lot of picking and choosing of what we get. And one of the categories I feel like the Constitution falls into, generally speaking, amidst the populace of people, and maybe including a Bruce Jenner, maybe not, but it's one of those texts where so many people, they get their understanding of it secondhand. You don't often go to the source. Some do. I have friends that carry a Constitution in their pocket every day, but a lot do not. It's in the same realm as something like Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, Marx, the Bible. Those are all texts that the one commonality, most people get their interpretation and understanding of that text secondhand. And when they actually go and they read it, they're like, oh, wait a second. Some people are very selective with what they decide to share or abide by in this text.
And that also goes to a good point about messaging and, back to what people like Jenner believe. I don't expect Bruce Jenner to be really up to date with politics, to really kind of understand the nuances of politics and exactly where his party stands. Once again, I mentioned that he's a pretty wealthy guy. And so, he doesn't really have to pay attention to things other than the inheritance tax, for example, which the Republicans just passed a $269 billion repeal of that would cost our coffers that much in revenue. That would only affect about a very, very small percentage of families in America. And, stuff like that. And of course, taxes on wealthy people. He wants low taxes. I completely understand that. I think we all want low taxes for ourselves. I get it. So it comes down to messaging, right? Conservatives are really good. Republicans are really good at getting out the message that we're the party of freedom, we're the party of liberty, we're the party of the Constitution, when it's not exactly true. I mean, the Constitution, it's almost as if they think that they're the ones who wrote it. It was liberals that wrote the Constitution. You know where the conservatives were at that time? They had on red coats. So, yeah, liberals wrote the Constitution. It takes a liberal mind to say, you know what, we're going to create a government on our own. That's going to treat all men fairly and equally. And yes, it took us a long time to get to that point. But nonetheless, it takes a liberal mindset of change and wanting something new and different and better than the old. That's the essence of liberalism. And the fact that they can sit there and claim that they own the Constitution as if they're the ones who created it, and they're the ones that are guarding it and protecting it. Completely untrue. And it always bothers me.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up all good points. I mean, especially when you bring up the history of this country and some of the early thinkers of this country, the whole essence of free thinking, and just kind of, I guess even to a degree, you could go as far as to say like certain ideas of radicalism, all of those have been very much pushed under the rug, and instead you get this very surface-oriented explanation of, oh no, they were Christians, they were this, they were that. And, when you read between the lines, it's like, actually, no, that's not all true. On the same note, it's not like all of the founding fathers of this nation were perfect. They did a lot of stuff I don't endorse, but yeah, people are selective.
And there's that reverence that we have of that, especially when it comes to some conservatives that revere the founding fathers as if they were perfect, as if they were Jesus-like figures. And that always irritates me too, because once again, as revolutionary, pun intended, as they are, or as they were, they still got things wrong. We still had slavery for, at least over 100 years. After the founding of the country, people were still not treated equally. Women, they didn't get the right to vote until the 1920s. So we really had a long way to go, but nonetheless, it was a liberal thing. And liberals and progressives are the ones that have been driving the country forward. That's the whole essence of liberalism, is change for the better. And that's the messaging problem that we run into with conservatives. And once again, I don't expect somebody like Bruce Jenner to understand those intricacies, because I don't expect him to pay attention to politics. It goes back to what Tom Hartman calls some Republicans. There are rich people, and then there are suckers. And they're the ones who are misinformed and uninformed, and buy these buzzwords and catchwords that don't exactly mean what they're supposed to mean. It's kind of Orwellian when you think about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's just surface-oriented PR and surface-oriented advertising, which is kind of, and that makes it just this sort of bite-sized morsel where you can take home. Oh, of course this is liberty. This is freedom. Of course this is where I'm going. And then you kind of take a step back and think, well, what does this really mean? What am I really subscribing to? Does Bruce Jenner do that introspection? Maybe, maybe not. I have no clue. But, either way, the fact that she identifies as a conservative Republican is not really at all surprising.
Right. And you mentioned the log cabin Republicans earlier, and there is the executive director, national executive director of the log cabin Republicans, goes by the name of Gregory T. Angelo. He released a statement after this, basically welcoming Bruce Jenner, welcoming her into the fold of conservative Republicans, with this statement. As the nation's only organization representing LGBT conservatives and straight allies, Log Cabin Republicans congratulates Bruce Jenner in the tremendous courage he demonstrated tonight. Being true to himself, both in terms of his personal identity as well as his political identity, there's a home for you in Log Cabin Republicans, as there is for all lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender conservatives and straight allies. Look, nothing would make me happier than if the conservatives were actually accepting of the Log Cabin Republicans. You know why? Because it's not just about party to me. It's about, hey, you should treat them as human beings. But as we saw recently, the Republican Party, the GOP, isn't exactly even close to accepting them, the Log Cabin Republicans, as equals, as evidenced by a story that I did probably a week or two ago, where there's a conservative conference coming up in the summer, and the Log Cabin Republicans attempted to get a booth there and were denied. Why? Because you don't share our traditional conservative values of family and freedom and faith and whatnot. And I just find that, I don't know. I find it amazing that you can be a part of a party that doesn't accept you, and maybe you're trying to, fix it from the inside. But if that's the case, good luck. You have a long road ahead of you. But I hope it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I can only, I don't quite get it either. And I've talked to, I do have some friends that consider themselves Republicans, and they're not some of them actually are like having Republicans, and we've had those conversations before where I'm just like, well, why? I mean, they don't really want you there, and why do you find an identification with this group? And a lot of it has to do with the fiscal end, which I kind of don't understand that a whole lot, because
you can't really
you
can't really argue that the Republican Party is all that fiscally sound either.
No, not at all. And quite frankly, if you're all about, like tax cuts and this and that, I mean, Republicans and Democrats really aren't all that different. So, I don't really see why somebody would subscribe in that situation. But people do. Some, not many, but some folks do. There are some log-cabin Republicans out there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, anyway, I just want to, hope that Bruce Jenner, she finds I guess she tries to change the party's perception of people who are transgender. It's going to take a long time, but best of luck to her in the future. And and hey, I think it's great that she was able to be herself.
Well, and I think the one cool thing too is that this will shine a little bit of light on just what the transgender community goes through in general. Because I think a lot of people, they still just don't really understand that. Like they don't understand what transgender people go through, how it feels to just not. And again, I can only imagine what it feels like as a person, having not experienced those feelings myself.
Right.
I can't, I know what it feels like to feel alien in a town where I'm like, I feel uncomfortable here. I know what it feels like to maybe feel alien in an apartment because you have a bad roommate situation. I can only imagine what it feels like to feel that alien way in my own body. I can only imagine what that feels like. Yeah. And I just imagine it's those feelings times hundreds, and I can only fathom it. So I think when more people realize that that's what transgender people go through, I think we'll move forward on that a little bit, a little bit more. And that's a good thing.
Right. And at the end of the day, it's about, acceptance of everybody, whether or not you're conservative or not. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you're accepted as a human being with the same basic rights as anybody else. And that's really what the Constitution is supposed to be about.
Dare to dream.